What would you do if someone threatened to plaster your most private photos across the internet? Would you beg, would you hide, or would you burn his world to the ground? I only needed 45 minutes to end his career, his freedom, and his lies. Ethan had built his life around rules, contracts, statutes, precedents. As an attorney, he trusted the structure of law more than he trusted people. People, in his experience, lied, they broke promises. They disappointed, but the law was cold, clean, unfeeling, and safe. Still, there was one exception to his guarded nature, Claire. He had known her for years, and in a world where everyone seemed to want something from him, Claire wanted nothing except honesty. She was bright in a way that softened the edges of his cynicism, quick with a laugh that disarmed his darker moods. When Ethan worked brutal late nights, it was Claire who dropped by with coffee and told him he looked like a vampire billing clients by the hour. When his father passed away, it was Claire who sat in silence beside him. No platitudes, no empty comfort, just presence. To Ethan, Claire wasn't just a friend. She was the anchor that kept him from drifting too far into the cold machinery of his profession. Protecting her felt less like a choice and more like a reflex. That's why on the night she showed up at his apartment, eyes swollen, voice trembling, clutching her phone like it was a live grenade, Ethan felt something inside him shift. He didn't know it yet, but her pain would become the spark that lit the darkest fire in him. Her hands shook so badly she could barely unlock her phone. When she finally managed, she pushed it toward Ethan without a word. On the screen was a message thread. At first glance, it looked ordinary: emojis, flirty exchanges, pictures blurred by the system until tapped. But as Ethan scrolled, his pulse slowed, then spiked. The man's words weren't sweet anymore, they were knives. If you don't meet me, I'll send these to everyone. Don't think I won't. Remember that picture in the red top? That'll look good on your office bulletin board. You think you can just back out now? I own you. Ethan stopped reading. He looked at Claire. Her face was drained of color, her eyes red-rimmed. I thought he was normal, she whispered, as if even saying it too loud would make the threats more real. He said he was coming here for work. He was kind, and then I said I didn't feel comfortable, and this is what I get. Shame radiated off her in waves. She wrapped her arms around herself as if she could shrink, disappear. Ethan recognized the look, the crushing weight of being cornered, humiliated. Something jagged tore inside him. Claire wasn't just frightened. She was being dismantled from the inside out. Her trust, her dignity turned into leverage. The law taught him to measure damages in dollars, in liability, in legal exposure. But this wasn't a lawsuit, this was cruelty stripped bare. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt rage uncoil in his chest like a living thing. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of Claire's phone buzzing on his kitchen table. She had fallen asleep on his couch, her body curled up small, like a child bracing against the world. He picked up the phone, another message. This one was worse: you've got until tonight. Don't think I can't find your work email. Everyone will know what kind of girl you really are. Ethan stared at the words until his jaw ached from how tightly he was clenching it. He could practically hear the man's sneer behind each keystroke. The predator wasn't bluffing. This wasn't empty posturing, it was escalation. For a flicker of a second, Ethan considered the legal route. Police report, cybercrime division, some official process. But he knew what that would mean: paperwork, delays, questions that would drag Claire through humiliation all over again. Even if they acted, by then the photos could already be unleashed into the wild. He looked at Claire, still sleeping, her face blotchy from tears. The thought of her waking up tomorrow to find her private photos smeared across the internet, her reputation shredded, her life altered forever, ignited something primal in him. No judge, no jury, no filings. The man thought anonymity made him untouchable. He thought threats were power. Ethan whispered to himself, a vow, not a thought, not on my watch. Not to her. It was in that moment the line was drawn. Ethan would find him, strip him bare, and destroy everything he leaned on to feel powerful. The law might catch up someday. But Ethan was already in motion. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of Ethan's laptop. Claire still slept in the next room, but Ethan hadn't closed his eyes. Instead, his screen glowed with dozens of tabs, usernames, images, search queries, digital trails that most people wouldn't bother connecting. But Ethan wasn't most people. Years of litigation had wired his brain for patterns. Where others saw noise, Ethan saw links, and each link was a thread leading straight to the man who thought he was untouchable. He leaned closer to the monitor, the blue light hollowing his face. A TikTok page matched the handle. A motorcycle in one of the videos carried a license plate half visible in the background. A LinkedIn profile boasted the same polo shirt Ethan had just seen in a photo the man sent Claire. His pulse quickened, piece by piece. The mask of anonymity crumbled. Ethan scribbled notes in a yellow legal pad, his handwriting jagged, restless. Every discovery was fuel, every confirmation a spark. The man wasn't a phantom anymore. He had a name, a job, a boss, an address. A life Ethan could set on fire with the right kind of match. And here was the shift. Ethan didn't feel like a lawyer building a case. He felt like a hunter, cold, calculating, consumed. He paused once, rubbing his temples. This wasn't legal, not really. He was gathering evidence, yes, but the way his mind churned, the way his stomach coiled with anticipation, it wasn't about justice anymore. It was about annihilation. He glanced toward the closed door where Claire slept. Her trust in him was implicit, total. She believed he would keep her safe. But even she didn't know the storm he was calling down. Ethan shut his laptop with a click that echoed in the quiet. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. The plan was already forming, sharp and merciless. This wasn't the law anymore, this was war. By dawn, Ethan's living room looked less like a home and more like a war room. Legal pads littered the coffee table, his laptop pulsed with open tabs, and his printer hummed steadily, spitting out sheet after sheet of evidence. Every photo, every screenshot, every timestamp. He gathered them all, his hands steady now, movements deliberate, like a surgeon preparing instruments before an operation. The man had been sloppy, sending pictures of his office desk, his company-issued laptop, even a calendar full of client names. He had snapped photos with co-workers in the background, their faces blurred but still recognizable. Proof of reckless arrogance, proof Ethan could use. Ethan clipped each piece of evidence into neat stacks, threats of revenge born, the raw violence of words in black and white, workplace violations, images of sensitive documents, stolen moments of colleagues. Personal identifiers, motorcycle plates, branded uniforms, selfies with company logos. He didn't just want this man punished, he wanted him ruined. The email drafted itself in Ethan's mind as he worked, clinical, precise, impossible to ignore. He imagined it landing in the inbox of a CEO, the VP of HR, the company's legal department. He imagined their faces tightening as they scrolled through proof of an employee's depravity, his violations stacked like bricks on his own grave. At one point, Ethan stopped, staring at the mountain of evidence. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened TV screen across the room. There was something hollow in his own eyes, a sharpness he didn't recognize. For years, he had trusted that the law was enough. But now, the law was too slow, too clean, too forgiving. This was just as rewritten in fire, and once the email was sent, there would be no turning back. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the email, a tiny pulse of hesitation against an ocean of venom. Ethan read through it again, line by line, ensuring there wasn't a crack the man could slip through. The subject line was simple, unforgiving, employee misconduct, immediate action required. He attached the files one by one, screenshots of the threats, photos of the man in company-branded clothing, his motorcycle plate, the Outlook calendar full of confidential data, the office selfies with oblivious coworkers in the background. The evidence didn't just accuse him, it buried him alive. The email itself was measured, clinical, stripped of emotion. Ethan wrote not as a friend, not even as a lawyer, but as a force of inevitability. On behalf of my client, a U.S. citizen, I am forwarding to you documentation of one of your employees engaging in criminal harassment and threats of non-consensual pornography. Enclosed, you will find evidence of workplace policy violations, disclosure of proprietary information, and use of corporate equipment to engage in criminal acts. This matter will also be reported to local and federal law enforcement. Should this individual be traveling to the United States, law enforcement will be waiting upon arrival. Please review the attachments at once. No flourish, no wasted words, just a guillotine blade, already dropping. Ethan's finger hovered for a breath, his pulse was steady, but a strange clarity washed over him, the same clarity he felt in court seconds before delivering a closing argument that would seal a verdict. Then he pressed send. The email whisked away into the void, quiet and unremarkable. But in that silence, Ethan knew a man's world had just been set on fire. He sat back, staring at the screen, his body buzzed with adrenaline, but his chest felt heavier. This wasn't a bluff, this wasn't reversible. The Predator's anonymity had been ripped away, and Ethan had just pulled the trigger. For the first time in this war, the balance of power shifted. And Ethan knew the man would feel it like a noose tightening around his neck. The email sat in his sent folder like a live grenade. No alarms went off, no flashing lights, just silence, but Ethan knew. Somewhere across an ocean, a phone would buzz. A man who thought he was untouchable would open his inbox and see his own destruction spelled out in black and white. His face would blanch, his gut would drop. His arrogance would curdle into fear. Ethan leaned back, exhaling through clenched teeth. For years, he'd thrived on the illusion of control, on procedures, motions, verdicts delivered with pomp and restraint. But this was raw, lawless, personal. He poured himself a drink, neat bourbon, and stared at the ice clinking in the glass. His reflection in the amber liquid looked like a stranger, colder, sharper, hungrier. A part of him whispered that it wasn't too late. He could minimize the damage, warn Claire. Pretend the evidence was never sent, but deep down, he knew that was a lie. The moment his finger touched send, the chain reaction had begun. He imagined the man scrambling, bosses breathing down his neck, HR demanding explanations, the company legal team scrambling to assess liability. Every second that ticked by was another thread unraveling in his life. Ethan's phone vibrated on the table, not from Claire, but from his own inbox. Automatic reply, "We have received your email. The matter is under review." The words glared at him, confirmation stamped in cold corporate language. And just like that, Ethan felt the floor tilt. This wasn't a plan anymore. This was real, it was happening. There was no undo button, no safe retreat. He'd set fire to the bridge behind him, and now he could only walk forward, straight into the blaze. The first sign came faster than Ethan expected. Less than 24 hours after he pressed send, his inbox pinged again. This time, it wasn't a sterile auto-reply. It was a letterhead email, formal and bristling with urgency. "We are investigating serious allegations regarding one of our employees. Effective immediately, he has been suspended pending termination. We appreciate your cooperation and will provide updates as required." Ethan read it twice, then a third time. His lips curled into something between a smile and a snarl. The trap had sprung. He pictured the scene unfolding oceans away, the Predator sitting in a conference room, blinds half drawn, sweat darkening the collar of his polo. HR across from him, a printed packet of Ethan's attachments fanned across the table. Each page a mirror, reflecting back his own filth. His manager glaring, the corporate lawyer scribbling notes, the CEO's silence a weight heavier than any words. The man who once boasted about power, who thought a few photos made him untouchable, was now shrinking in a chair while his empire turned to ash. But Ethan wasn't done. He attached the same dossier to a fresh email, this one addressed to local police in the Predator's hometown. Then another, this time to his contact at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And one more to a federal cybercrime tip line. Each sent notification landed like a hammer stroke. By the time Ethan closed his laptop, the man's world wasn't just collapsing, it was imploding, career destroyed. Law enforcement alerted, international travel flagged. An entire digital footprint rewritten into a confession of guilt. Claire came into the room as Ethan drained the last of his bourbon. Her eyes were puffy, but steadier now. She asked quietly, "Did you do something?" Ethan didn't answer directly. He only said, "He won't hurt you again." Outside, the night pressed heavy against the windows, silent and watchful. And somewhere far away, a predator who thought himself a ghost was learning what it felt like to be hunted and cornered. Days passed, though to Ethan, they felt stretched thin, like film pulled across a projector. News didn't break publicly, not yet, but word traveled in shadows. A LinkedIn profile vanished overnight. A TikTok account went dark, then an Instagram page, wiped clean. The man wasn't just losing his career, he was erasing himself, frantically scrubbing fingerprints off glass while the whole house burned down around him. Claire came by again, this time not in tears, but in a stunned, hollow sort of relief. She hadn't heard from him since the threats. No new messages, no demands. It was as if he'd been swallowed by the earth. "You really think it's over?" she asked one night, curled on Ethan's couch with her knees tucked under her chin. Ethan didn't answer right away. He stared at his laptop, where his evidence folder still sat on the desktop, glowing like a scar. "Over for you," he finally said, "for him. It's just beginning." The company had responded formally, suspension pending termination, the language of corporate execution. Law enforcement had acknowledged receipt of his report. His contact at the U.S. Attorney's office had even sent a brief note, "We lines keep an eye on this one." Good catch. All of it should have tasted like victory. And yet, Ethan found himself sitting awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, replaying the look on Clara's face that first night, the way shame had hollowed her out. He had done what he promised. He had protected her. But beneath the satisfaction, something gnawed. He hadn't just defended Claire, he had taken pleasure in the hunt. Each new breadcrumb had felt like a shot of adrenaline, each click of send like a trigger pulled. And now, as the silence stretched and the man's online ghost flickered into nothing, Ethan couldn't tell if he felt cleaner or dirtier than the man he destroyed. The evidence folder still sat on Ethan's desktop weeks later, untouched, like a relic of war he couldn't bring himself to delete. He knew the case was out of his hands now, in the grip of HR departments, prosecutors, faceless systems that would grind the man down into consequences, but the silence wasn't peace. At night, when Claire finally laughed again, real laughter, not brittle, Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. She was healing, moving forward, and yet, he wasn't. He poured bourbon more often now, sitting in the half-dark with only the glow of his monitor. Sometimes he scrolled through the old screenshots, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to feel that charge again, the heat in his blood, the pulse of power as each breadcrumb turned into proof, as each proof turned into a weapon. And he hated himself for it. For years, he had believed the law was clean, that his job was to uphold order, not descend into chaos. But the truth was simpler, uglier. Revenge had tasted good, too good. He stared at his reflection in the black screen one night, his own face faint against the shadows. For a moment, he didn't see an attorney or a protector or even a friend. He saw a man who had discovered just how intoxicating it was to destroy another human being. Claire would never know the full extent. She'd never see the lines Ethan had crossed, or how close he'd come to savoring it. She was safe, that was enough, but Ethan knew. And the question that gnawed at him in the silence was it worth it? It was darker. What if I ever want to feel that power again?